to winning isn't easy. UNUM policyholder triumphs in MS-related cognitive impairment. Did you know that there are 3 types of MS that can result in a disability insurance claim? There's relapsing remitting MS, known as RRMS. Secondly, there's primary progressive MS. And lastly, there's secondary progressive MS. Many times, disability carriers not only don't understand the different types of MS, they don't understand the disabling symptoms, particularly the symptoms of relapsing remitting MS. Now, this is a type of MS where symptoms get worse, followed by periods of recovery. As time passes, the period between the relapses becomes shorter, and it becomes more difficult for your body to repair the damage caused by MS. Now, MS will cause many disabling symptoms that can result in a disability claim. But what carriers tend to do is ignore those symptoms and seize on the fact that there are periods of remission, and that during those periods of remission, the person isn't disabled. And so they'll deny the claim. But they continue to ignore the fact that the person, policyholder or plan beneficiary, has symptoms. So what are those symptoms? Well, there's visual impairment, and that can include blurred vision, double vision, or even loss of vision. There's muscular impairment, and that can include cramping, difficulty walking, an inability to change positions, involuntary movements, muscle paralysis, rigidity, muscle weakness, muscle spasm, stiffness, and problems with coordination. There are also sensory impairments, and that can include a pins and needles sensation, a reduced sensation of touch, or a tingling or a burning sensation. There can also be speech impairment, which will include slurred speech and difficulty speaking. There's urinary impairment. That can include excessive urination or leaking of urine, the persistent urge to urinate, and even urinary retention. There are tremors, vertigo, pain, and fatigue. That can include whole body pain, which obviously can be disabling. The vertigo can cause significant issues with balance and can result in falls that even result in additional injury. And of course, fatigue, that debilitating fatigue, can just wipe you out both physically and cognitively. There is cognitive impairment. That includes difficulty thinking, understanding, concentrating, and staying on task. Now, unfortunately, as I've said, disability carriers don't understand RMRS and the disabling symptoms, and looking for a way to deny a claim, they're going to seize on episodes of remission. Let me give you an example of how they do that and ignore symptoms. This is the case of Akins versus UNUM, and it's an example of the denial game. So let's start out with the claims review procedure. Jeffrey Akins was an equipment manager for Harrison Construction. He stopped working in 2018 because of his RMRS. He submitted a claim, and UNUM approved his benefits beginning in September of 2018 under the plan's own occupation provision. UNUM reminded him that he would be subject to a continuing review, which is code language that the disability carrier is always going to be looking for a reason to deny or terminate benefits. So, in November of 2021, UNUM did a review of Akins' disability status. And guess what? As expected, they determined that he was not disabled from performing his own occupation. He had miraculously recovered. So UNUM terminated his benefits. Akins filed an appeal letters with his doctors, attesting to his disability and attesting to the results of further testing. And the progression of the disease. And of course, guess what UNUM did? They upheld the denial, and Akins filed a lawsuit in federal court. Let's talk about something that's really crucial to the resolution of these cases by the court, and that's the standard of review. There are generally no trials in an ERISA disability case. The federal judge's decision is based on a legal pleading that each side files with the judge. These pleadings are called a motion for summary judgment, and it's basically where the judge is looking at what was in the carrier's file at the time of the last denial. And both sides are making arguments as to why they're right. In making the decision, the judge is going to look to the terms of the disability policy or plan to determine if they can apply that more favorable standard of review called the de novo standard of review. Now, under the arbitrary and capricious standard, we have to prove that the decision to deny or terminate benefits was arbitrary or capricious. Now, that sounds pretty easy to do, but every federal circuit in the United States has a different way to interpret it. And in my view, the arbitrary and capricious standard of review is a handcuff on judges that limits their ability to overturn a wrongful denial or termination, even if they think the carrier was wrong. The more preferable standard of review is the de novo standard of review. That lets the judge exercise their own independent judgment and reach a fair decision without being handcuffed, if you will, by that arbitrary and capricious standard of review that says, unless you, the judge, find that this decision was arbitrary and capricious, you're stuck with our denial or termination. So fortunately, in this case, applying a de novo standard of review to UNUM's decision, the court found that the record demonstrates that Akins couldn't perform his light work occupation due to his MS and associated symptoms of extreme fatigue and spasticity. Now, these symptoms would have prevented him functioning safely in the workplace, both physically and cognitively. The court noted that his treating neurologist had issued opinions about the impact of fatigue and the spasticity before and after UNUM terminated his benefits. The testing supported his cognitive decline, and the court looked at those medical records and then reviewed the UNUM liar for hire peer review. Disability carriers like UNUM justify claims denial or terminations by having liar for hire peer review doctors review records and render an opinion. In fact, UNUM was highly criticized in a multi-state attorney general settlement many years ago. They haven't changed their behavior. So what did they do in this case? Well, in this case, instead of having an MS specialist do the peer review, they had a urologist and a retinal specialist. And of course, as expected, both the urologist and retinal specialist said that Akins wasn't disabled from a urological or a vision standpoint. But what UNUM missed was the fact that he suffered from other disabling symptoms. He had the fatigue, the muscle spasticity, he had cognitive issues, he had gait disturbances. And that was the reason that, in fact, UNUM had paid the claim to begin with. UNUM never addressed those issues or even addressed those issues by the right type of physician. Well, what was one of the other reasons that UNUM tried to justify their denial? Relapsing remitting MS can lead to the good day, not so bad day type of termination that we see. And that's exactly what UNUM did. They tried to justify the termination on the basis of a good day, not so bad day. So that's a common tool I see in their toolbox. And in this case, UNUM's reviewing doctors opined that his symptoms on a good day demonstrated that he could work on any day. Now that's a leap, because one good day doesn't make for an ability to perform work the next day or the day after or for an entire week. The court debunked that argument and rejected UNUM's termination justification reasons. Now, what did the court do? Well, let's talk about the court's decision on UNUM's wrongful benefit termination. The court granted judgment in favor of Akins and found that UNUM had incorrectly terminated his benefits. And that is the right decision and a great decision for Akins. I hope that you've learned a lot of lessons about how disability carriers will use different tools and different justifications to try to argue that what they did was right, when in fact we know that it's wrong. Wrong morally, wrong ethically, wrong legally. Got it? Well, I hope that you've enjoyed this week's episode of Winning Isn't Easy. Please like this page, leave a review, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to this podcast. That way you'll be notified every time a new episode comes out. Please tune in next week for another insightful episode of Winning Isn't Easy.